Hello! I'm Elaine, and I'm a tour guide in the French Quarter. I do ghost tours. And I am not going to tell you the stories that I tell on my tour, because you gotta pay for those. But if you want to hear some interesting things that have happened to me while I'm leading random drunk people around the French Quarter, I got you. So, humans are just awkward. And that means when you get a buttload of random people together for a tour, sometimes you're going to have awkward moments. And I will be the first to admit some of those awkward moments are entirely me. There was an entire night that I did the tour, looked down at the end, and realized that my pants had been unzipped the entire time. And, like, my guests had been sitting on the sidewalk on the curbs for some of that. So, yeah, they'd been staring directly at my crotch. And there was another night that I came home, looked in the mirror, and realized the tank top I was wearing was completely see-through. Just a couple of days ago, I had a guy come up and was talking to some of the guests behind, like, in the back of my tour, and I paused to be like, dude, what the hell, leave him alone. Turns out they had asked him a question, not the other way around. But a buttload of the awkward moments on the tours are the guests. There was one night I was gathering my guests together, and three women signed in first thing, and they were very nice. They were probably like middle-aged to older, and they clearly were all roughly the same age. And I signed them in, and they were just standing around chatting, and another girl came up to sign in, and she was really drunk. And the moment she gets there, she looks at these three other women and go, "Oh my God, that's so sweet. Three generations coming on the same tour." And of course, one of those women looked at her and was like, excuse me? What the hell do you mean by that? And she's like, well, three generations, the mom, daughter, and granddaughter. And of course, this woman waved vaguely at each of those women as she said that. And that meant that, of course, the woman who was indicated to be the grandmother is looking around at her two friends who are clearly the same age as her going, what the fuck? And that led for a very awkward conversation because the woman would not stop insisting that there were three generations. Meanwhile, the other women were sitting there being like, look, we graduated high school together. You have got to stop saying we're three separate generations. But another awkward moment. There was a night my group was waiting, and there was a tarot card reader behind us, and he's there all the time. He's always been very polite to me. I've never had problems with him. I do find him utterly hilarious because when he's trying to get people to come over, he won't just, like, as a lot of people do, be like, hey, tarot card reading. What he'll do is he'll say, hello, ladies, come over for a tarot card reading. But that night, I guess my best guess is he wanted us to move on, didn't want us gathering in front of him any longer. Because literally, I'm just talking to my guest, none of us have even looked at him, and out of the blue, he says, you know, I've never slept with a black man. But that's not the word he used. The word he used was Negroid. And I just sort of look back and forth with my guests and go, okay, we're gonna go around the corner to start this tour. Super awkward. But the most recent really awkward moment I had on a tour, I had a group that was very drunk. And they were the kind of drunk that they probably shouldn't have been on this tour. They did not know what was going on. They were not listening. They were not focusing. And there were two guys that were the really drunk ones. And, like, they'd been obviously bothering their friends for the last couple of stops, but it was fine. They were their group collectively was the only group on the tour, so it didn't really matter. But I'm getting annoyed. And we get to the last stop. And the last stop is about a woman who tortured enslaved people to death. And one of the way I like to end that stop is by explaining that basically she got away with it. And the way I phrase this is I say she lived the rest of her days in Paris, surrounded by her family and relative wealth. And this drunken asshole, who I can only assume had not been listening for the last, 5 minutes of story, looks up and just goes, good for her. And the next line that I always say in that stop is, that's not quite the ending I want for a most famous racist asshole of all time. Or actually, I usually don't say asshole, depending on what group it is. But the important thing is I make a very clear point of saying, yeah, she was a racist monster. And I will admit that line came out with a lot more venom than it usually does. And he just went white as a sheet and looked around and was just sort of like, oh. And then he wandered away before I was done with the story, before the tour was over, and his friends were sitting there calling him. He just walks away. And my best bet is that he just walked straight into the river, never to return. Awkwardness.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and feel free to share your own experiences in the comments below.